Spring is such a beautiful time of year. The world is awakening from the slumber of winter. New life is beginning. It's a wonderful time to go outside and enjoy the changing of the seasons. And it's also a very nice time to make a new dress. I began with a basic bodice block made out of this mesh, which is very close to my skin color. There are darts in the front and back, and then there are side seams. And the bodice is going to close in the back, so I have that pinned onto the mannequin. Next, I'm adding appliques. This is going to create that lacy illusion mesh look for the bodice. To add the applique, first I'm pinning it to get an idea of how I want it to look. Because this applique is mirrored left to right, once I pin it on the mannequin, I am going to check and make sure that it's lined up right in the middle so it's all symmetric. This is something I like to do on the mannequin because it's very much a drapery, kind of see what looks right sort of technique. I also have appliques for the back of the bodice. I love these. I think they're reminiscent of wings in a sort of subtle but yet sparkly way, and I think they'll really make this dress beautiful. The skirt is made out of chiffon, so I'm just taking my pink chiffon here and starting to drape it to get an idea of how I want it to go. I'm actually going to go ahead and put on the appliques before I really start the skirt, but this way I just kind of see what I'm working with first. I love going outside in the springtime. I love going outside all the time, but it's just something beautiful in the air in spring. And so I thought I would take this spring gown outside with me, and I sat down to work on some of the hand stitching at one of my local parks. For this part of the gown, I'm hand stitching on these appliques. To do that, I'm using a thread that matches the applique as close as possible. I'm leaving the extra mesh around the applique right now. We're going to cut that off after I sew it down. To sew this on, I choose any part of the applique that I think looks like a good starting point. Right here, I'm choosing some of the parts around the flower portion, just because I think I can easily hide my knots underneath there. To sew on the applique, I am stitching by hand all the way around the edge of the design on the embroidered piece. I'm being careful to go around all of the design elements of this piece and leaving that extra mesh around the edges just loose there because I'm going to actually cut that off later. This is a process that takes quite a bit of time. It's honestly a great process to do while you're sitting at the park and just enjoying nature. Once I have all the appliques sewn on, it is time to remove that extra mesh. I'm going to take a pair of scissors and cut very carefully close to where I stitched without cutting my stitches. Now, I've made quite a few of these types of gowns before, and yes, I have cut my stitches by accident on the first gown I made. That happened a few times. And it's okay if that happens. You can just re-secure the thread and re-stitch the portion that you cut. It's really not the end of the world, but obviously it's much better if you don't cut your stitching. So just be really careful and take your time on this part. This is definitely not a part to rush. In fact, none of the parts of this gown are a rush. This is a very slow and steady, sort of calming, meditative process to make a gown of this style. The next part I'm working on is the cape I'm going to put on the arms. This is really a simple rectangle of chiffon, which I am hemming here using the rolled hem on my serger. The cape was the fastest part of this project. It's essentially just draped from the upper arms. I played with it a little bit on the mannequin to see how I wanted the drape, and then I'm using this double-sided satin ribbon to secure it to the arms. So here I'm playing with how I think I might want to tie it, and you can always tie this however you like as long as the ribbon is just attached freely to the cape, which is what I end up doing on this dress. The back of the bodice has a zipper. To insert the zipper, I'm folding over the edge of the mesh over the top of the zipper, and I'm pinning that down, and then I'm stitching the zipper in using a zipper foot. This is kind of like inserting any zipper. It's just a little bit more finicky because you're dealing with that very lightweight, superfine mesh. For the skirt, I am also using the serger's rolled hem function to secure the edges of all the fabric pieces. Then to prep the dress for the addition of the skirt, this will require a little bit more draping on the mannequin. Essentially, I want to see how much fabric I want to use, what kind of drape looks nice, and that's all this sort of by eye approach right here on this particular project. But don't worry, we are not without math. There will be a little bit of measuring involved to get this exactly right. The measuring will serve a couple of purposes. In the front, we have this dip in the bodice, and I want to make slits on both sides of the front leg. So what I'm going to do there is make sure that I'm having a panel that's equal on both sides, like symmetric all the way around the gown. And also I need to measure how far down that dip is going to be because I'm going to need to cut that into the skirt. So I measure the amount of dip between each of the panels of the skirt, and then I'm transferring that dip to the fabric. So what I'm doing is just cutting off what's going to be the top of the panel, so that way the bottom will still be an even hem. And then at the top there, it's already cut off to the height that I want it to be in the end. Where I have the leg openings, I'm stitching just a little bit at the top of the skirt. And then for the other seams, I'm stitching all the way down to the hem. This is a gathered skirt. I sewed 2 rows of gathering stitches along the entire top edge. And I started gathering it, and then I went ahead and started pinning the skirt. So I have marked on the dress where I need the seams to go, and then I know that I need to match those up with the seams of the skirt. So once I start pinning it onto the mannequin, I can adjust the gathers and make it so that it's perfectly symmetrical. And then finally, it is time to stitch the skirt onto the bodice of the dress. You may notice that I cut the bodice of the dress much longer than I needed it. I did that strategically because I wasn't sure exactly how I was going to place the skirt yet. Remember, this is very much a draping project, very visual and to the eye. So after the skirt is attached, I'm actually cutting off all that excess from the lower part of the bodice. So that way I have a little bit of seam allowance left, but I don't have, all the extra in there. And at last, it looks like our dress is coming together quite well. I did add a couple of darts at the side of the bust in the bodice there. I did that just how it draped properly. And what would make a dress better? More sparkle, of course. So I'm adding a few more rhinestones here. There are already quite a few. I'm just filling in a little bit where I think it could use some extra. I'm attaching these particular rhinestones with E6000. I'm doing that because it's easier to do on a mannequin than it is using fabric tack, which is the other glue that I really love to use. And that makes an absolutely beautiful springtime gown. The style of illusion mesh gown with applied lacework, embroidery, sparkles, all sorts of different decorations is really trending right now, and it's very popular for things like wedding dresses, prom dresses, formal occasion dresses, and it's easy to see why, because it's really beautiful and it just has this sort of magical fairy feeling, which I absolutely love. I really love wearing this type of dress to photo shoots to make beautiful art, but I also love it for places like cosplay conventions, formal events, and anywhere that's just a little bit more magical and gives you a chance to dress up. You can even wear this to Ren Fair. I think it totally goes with the fairy goddess sort of theme. And in fact, for me, some of the inspiration for shooting this dress was the goddess Ostara. Ostara or Ostara, not quite sure on that pronunciation, are the same goddess named in High German and in Anglo-Saxon. Ostara is a goddess of spring and new beginnings, and in many modern pagan traditions, the spring equinox is still celebrated as Ostara. The spring equinox is the time of year when light and dark are equal, hence equinox, and it typically occurs sometime around March 20th to 23rd approximately. Many of the old traditions of Ostara have morphed into today's Easter traditions in the Western world. Right down to the bunny and the eggs, those are things that have been associated with spring for such a long time. I love celebrating the changes of the seasons and the nature around us. I think it gives a special connection to the earth and to the entire universe. I think my favorite thing about springtime is just that feeling in the air of the earth awakening and coming to life. And I love to go outside and immerse myself in that feeling. What about you, friends? What's your favorite thing about the coming of spring? Thank you so much for joining me in this adventure into our new season and in making this beautiful dress. As always, find me on all the social medias as Daisy Viktoria. My website is daisyvictoria.com, and a special thank you to my patrons over on Patreon who help me so much to continue creating amazing content. I hope you all have an absolutely magical day. Happy spring, happy new beginnings. And I hope to see you again real soon. Bye-bye.